everyone, thank you for watching. My name is Lindsay Jane, and this is the Solarpunk Scene. I am going to be playing the game Gilded Shadows today. I did play the demo before for my game for my video 3 Solarpunk games, and this is my first time getting to go and play the full version of it. Hey Tyler! Alright, and yeah, no, we're just going to get started with that. Yeah, Patty, this is a PC game. It's the demo version is free on itch, and the full game version is sorry, Rev. Thank you for the compliment. Yeah, no, the full game's available on Steam and itch. So, with that, let's get started. Alright. This game's pretty neat. They have like a very in-depth character creation. I mean, for like a visual novel, a lot of the time, they can, like I've seen them have like pretty basic stuff. So, why don't we... Ooh, that's quite a bit more pale than I was hoping. Alright. There we go. Alright. Also with this game, they have it that you can go and choose your character traits. Cautious or confident. At its best, confidence is the ability to stand up for oneself, to be adventurous, and to stray from the beaten path with courage. At its worst, it is reckless and arrogance. It is overconfidence and making decisions without a sense of caution or foresight. And at its best, cautiousness is wisdom, shrewdness, and the strength to judge the repercussions of any actions or decisions before they're made. At its worst, cautiousness is the tendency to over-worry or to be anxious and uncertain of one's own decisions. It's indecisiveness due to fear or weakness. I will admit I do tend to be a bit more on the cautious side, so I would probably go with that. Alright. And stubborn or flexible. At its best, stubbornness is sticking to your own beliefs and opinions and staying resolute in your decisions in spite of obstacles, opposition, or persuasion to other sides. At its worst, it's willfully refusing to see you might be wrong, or it's refusing to acknowledge other points of view even if they're valid. At its best, flexibility is being able to change one's personal stance when the situation calls for it, to change for the better, and to see other points of view other than your own. At its worst, it is a tendency to be too easily swayed off the path you've chosen, or compliance with rules or orders without questioning the validity. So, I'm going to go with flexible, I think. Emotional or analytical. At its best, emotional is empathy. It's being unafraid to show vulnerabilities, openness, compassion, and humanity towards others. Being unafraid to do what feels right. At its worst, it's impulsivity. It is lacking self-control, acting on feelings over reason, and making impulsive decisions without thinking of the consequences. At its best, analytical is inquisitive. It is making decisions based on reason and evidence without letting emotions cloud one's judgment. At its worst, it's over-reliance on logic without making room for spontaneity. It lacks compassion and sympathy for others and puts reason above relationships. I tend to be emotional, so we'll go with that one. Alright, we'll just keep the original character name, which is Morgan Leon. Alright. Thanks for letting me know, Rev. Is that a little bit better? There we go. Hold on. It adjusted itself. Alright. Is that better level-wise for the music? Just let me... Perfect. Alright. Right? The visuals in this game are so super pretty. Like, they did a really great job with illustrating the backgrounds. Oh. Reality untwisted itself, and I felt the ground beneath my feet again. Nausea hit me as soon as everything stopped spinning. I doubled over, my stomach clenching painfully in protest of whatever just happened. I vomited, gagging against bile in my throat as my stomach violently emptied itself. I tried to get a hold of myself, desperately aware of the combined presence of the two men watching me retch on the ground. A pity I missed them. The thought flitted through my head as my legs finally gave up, even attempting to stand. The floor tilted toward the ceiling and I hit the ground, gripping my stomach with one hand while I caught myself on the other. I was still choking on the taste of acid and whatever was left in my stomach. Definitely not having the best of days. One of the two men finally crouched next to me and his hand passed over my back. A surprisingly gentle gesture from a damn kidnapper. Tall kidnapper. It's all right. Try to take deep breaths. Instinct told me to scramble away, but my body wasn't exactly in scrambling condition. I stayed in place, squinting at the ground and wishing he'd go away. Tall kidnapper. The first jump can be a little disorientating. It'll pass soon. I just ignored him and focused on figuring out what to do next. I just need to get a hold of myself. How had all this happened? And more importantly, what did these two men want with me? Chapter 1. En passant. Mum, how did it go? Did you do okay? I don't know yet, Mum. I just got out of the exam 20 minutes ago. Mum, do you have any idea how you did? Was it hard? Do you feel like you were answering well? I kept one eye on the street signal as I listened to Mum's eager questions through the net connection, smiling slightly at the excitement in her voice. She was always like this after an exam. I do think I did well. The last round was worse, so I studied much harder this time. Mum, you always study hard, Morgan, and it always pays off. I'm so proud of you. I laughed quietly. Mum, I should remind you that we don't know how well I did. I'm not sure you should be proud just yet. Mum, you know I'm proud of you no matter what happens. She paused and I waited for the inevitable finisher to that sentence. But you definitely think you passed, right? The light switched and I started across the street along with the rest of the crowd, smirking at how predictable she was. I passed into a crowded pedestrian walkway and paused right past the dividers. Passing is never really the issue, you know. I keep telling you I have to score in the top 10% this time, unless Dad is ready to do some major string pulling on my behalf. And we both know that even if he tries, there's no guarantee anything will come of it. Mum, I'm certain you'll hear good news. You've worked too hard to get bad news at this point. I feel like this is like a really familiar conversation. Her faith in me was sweet, but everyone else worked hard too. Mum, none of them have worked as hard as you have. I doubt that's true. We all work really hard every single time, but either way, I hope I hear good news as well. Mum, when will the results be in? They said 7 to 10 days, but it's usually a bit faster. Mum, I'll be planning your celebratory dinner soon, so you better clear your schedule this weekend. Please don't plan anything too elaborate this time, even if we do get good news. She just laughed and disconnected the conversation, and with that, I knew another big party was in store. I bit back a yawn and dug my knuckles into my eyes, trying to ignore the fatigue creeping in. The last few weeks have been truly exhausting. Every time an exam rolled around, it was like this. And for that, I kept trying to caution Mum not to get her hopes up. I was really pretty sure I'd scored well, But, of course, there were a lot of smart people taking this exam, and there weren't nearly as many positions open in the next study level for interplanetary archaeology. I would be super down for going and studying interplanetary archaeology. That would be pretty sick. Or any other subject for that matter. Opening in the prime tiers was more and more scarce the higher you went in school, and by the third level of secondary, competition was fierce, putting it lightly. Everyone was vying for precious few slots, and every person that made it in, there were 10 others who got bad news. I lifted my hair off my neck and started walking, holding in another yawn. The sleepiness felt like it hit all at once. I wondered if another nano-system expansion meant I wouldn't get tired as easily. Would be nice if I could suddenly get by on less sleep or something. I doubted it, though. Everyone knew expansions only helped with focus and memory capacity. Well, and the general synaptic response and all that. I didn't think sleeping less was one of the benefits, though. I knew a lot of students who would be all over that perk. Then again, sleeping was pretty nice, and I'd have to give up on that. I casually sidestepped a well-dressed man, so engrossed in conversation I'm pretty sure he didn't even notice me. He looked young, a few years older than me at most. He'd probably also been a student until fairly recently. My eyes followed him unconsciously, and I couldn't help but wonder if he'd gone into the workforce by choice, or if he'd been forced to drop out after an exam like the one I'd just taken. If the latter was true, I suppose he'd done pretty well for himself. Even if not making the top 50% meant being unable to continue school, anyone who made it this far would get a pretty good job. And to be fair, many people who didn't make prime tier would choose to drop out anyways. Otherwise, they'd end up in one of the two sub-tiers. But everyone knew sub-tiers weren't nearly as good as prime. You didn't even get live instructors. Everything went through the net with the uni AI teachers. Not that AI wasn't sophisticated, but still. And there was also the lack of nanosystem expansion in the sub-tiers. Wasn't like I could keep learning without it, but competing for the fourth level prime tiers would be even harder since I'd be up against everyone who did get an expansion. I shook my head, pushing the negative thoughts away. The system wouldn't change just for me thinking about what a struggle it was sometimes. With the exam over, all I could do was wait and hope for the best. And if I didn't make prime, then I would fight tooth and nail for as long as possible to get wherever I needed to get, to make it into an off-world research team. So there. Okay, no more worrying. I was going to just go home, relax, and take a long hot bath. After 3 weeks of non-stop studying, I deserved the longest and hottest of baths. Also a quiet dinner, a good book, and definitely no schoolwork. When I stepped through the door to my apartment, a notification popped up before I even set my things down. I paused, focusing on the message obscuring my vision. Mail? Not just any mail, either. Apparently I had an actual letter rather than a message through the net. How unusual. Dismissing the alert, I pushed the little button by the front door cautiously and waited for the mail slot to slide out to reveal its contents. A small, cream-colored envelope was nestled inside. I turned it over in my hands curiously. It was blank, no sender. I ran my fingertips over it, smiling slightly. Paper products weren't terribly uncommon, but they were less efficient. I hadn't gotten a real letter in ages. I pulled the front flap open, wondering who had sent me something like this. Happy birthday. It was a large script with a spiderweb of gold filigree behind it. The workmanship was quite admirable. Delicate swirls traced a careful pattern over the card. Really, it was beautiful. Too bad my birthday had been 7 months ago. I flipped the card open, and with an uncomfortable flutter in my stomach, instantly recognized the familiar handwriting. Trent. Who is this Trent guy? It made sense. Not many people would send me such a late birthday greeting, and he, of course, knew I loved things like this. but it had nearly been a year since I'd heard anything from him at all. This was the last thing I'd have expected. I skimmed the message, a soft sigh escaping. None of it surprised me. There were apologies for being late, and then a standard note hoping I was well, saying he missed me, and that he hoped to talk the next time he was in the capital, which would be soon, apparently be soon. Maybe we could see each other, meet up for coffee, and could I please contact him? And finally, contact information and his exact location on Syri. This guy has not messaged this person in like a year and is just casually like, yeah, let's just go and like meet for coffee. You know what? We are going to throw the card in the bin. We don't want it. Don't need it. I hesitated only the briefest of moments before I went to the bin and dropped the card in, listening to the sizzle as it was incinerated. Regret nudged at my heart, but it was too late, even if I wanted to retrieve it. A year. It'd been a year with no contact whatsoever, and he thought he could send a card and suddenly we could meet and talk? Where had he been a year ago? 6 months ago? I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to swallow down the bitterness I thought I'd already gotten over. When he left, I hadn't been angry at first. Not really. He hadn't done anything wrong, and being angry at him was unfair anyway. He'd wanted to do first-hand research on espers for as long as I'd known him, and when he made the 4th prime tier, we both knew there was a chance he'd be asked to join a program in another city. Now, just mentioning, something that's neat with this game is that obviously there's quite a bit of in-depth lore with it. So they have like these little sections that you can go and click on, and it goes and reveals more information about what these different terms mean. So when it's talking about espers, it's going and saying all humans on Arcalis are infected with nanites that have altered human physiology. These alterations led to the development of psi abilities in humans, and everyone infected with nanites possesses low levels of psi that permit them to utilize the nanosystem. However, in some humans, these changes triggered additional mutations which led to the development of more powerful psi abilities. These humans were the first espers. Currently, there are only 2 known types of espers: N-class, or nano-espers, whose abilities stem from their nanite-inflicted mutations, and F-class, or fairy espers, whose abilities stem from a mutation related to the nanosystem. So, kind of explaining that a little bit more. So apparently this guy's off going and studying people with psychic abilities. There weren't many places you could study the so-called fairy espers. So when the invitation came, it wasn't a surprise. I mean, sort of. I just hadn't expected that other city to be on the moon. Even so, it's not like I expected him to reject the opportunity. Not for me, not for anyone. But still. A year without a word? I'd gotten one message to say he'd landed safely, and then nothing. Not a note saying where he'd be working or living, not a single note to see how I was. He didn't even break up with me properly. Even if he didn't think we could work something out, if he didn't think a long-distance relationship could work, I deserved some kind of closure. Instead, I got a quick peck on the cheek at the station, then silence. This guy sounds like a jerk. I spent weeks hoping to hear from him. Something. Anything. Months hoping he was okay, and then being torn over whether I should ask his parents or if that would be creepy. And now, out of nowhere, he was asking if I wanted to meet up because he missed me? What about when I'd been missing him? A sour feeling clawed at my heart, and I took a slow breath as I pushed the bin shut again. No, I wasn't going to be prying back open that part of my life, much less jumping back into it. I shut my eyes and tried to quash the guilt. It was over and done with. No reason to regret it now. Any of it. Sorry, Trent. He'd walked away, and in the end, so had I. Happy birthday indeed. I made my way to the sofa, shedding clothes as I went along. So tired. Is this necessary? We're going to put that away. I flopped down on the pillows, letting out a soft groan, and now that I was down, I didn't actually want to move again. I could just sleep there. For the next 7 to 10 days. I opened my eyes, staring up at the ceiling, a slight smile coming to my lips. Well, not that long. I'd never hear the end of it if I missed the party for my maybe having made prime tier. And besides, I was pretty sure that if I didn't get up and find some food, my stomach was going to devour itself. I sat up and finally made my way to the cupboards to see what I actually had in the house that could potentially qualify as a quiet dinner. In the meantime, I flipped on the news with a small flick of my hand, because watching it in my head while trying to work out dinner would have been a nightmare. One ear was on what the impressively coiffed man was saying about another terrorist attack on New Albion, this time much closer to the cities at the eastern edge of the Twilight Wastes. And they'd shut down another drug cartel in Sessolis. Crimson got the blame for them both, as they usually did. Now what is Crimson? Crimson is an organized crime syndicate that is located in Delphine, but has influences all across Arcalis. They frequently engage in violent skirmishes with the governments on both sides of the planet, as well as other organizations and criminal families, of which there are 4 that are notable. So basically, a mob. Got it. Another reason to get off-world as soon as I can. I huffed in dissatisfaction as I stared down my cupboard. It was pretty empty, to say the least, unless you counted 1 foil packet of biscuits and a tin of mixed vegetables. Pathetic. I mean, to be fair, I hadn't really had time to place any orders or do any shopping before the exam. For the last few weeks, I've been eating mostly toast or whatever stray pieces of fruit I could find. Mom would kill me if she knew. Or at least lecture me about maintaining a proper diet. Well, now what? Delivery schedules for the nearby market were predictably filled, which meant I'd have to go shopping in person or eat out. I haven't done that much lately. There was a new bistro nearby I'd been wanting to try. Couldn't possibly hurt to put the shopping off another day and do something fun instead. That was the whole point of tonight, relaxing and fun. Though I've been looking forward to dinner without pants and then much anticipated bath with bubbles and candles and definitely a good book. Such was life. Decision made. I flipped off the screen and went to change before heading out again. The sun was still shining when I stepped back onto the street. To be fair, the sun was always shining in Sessolis, the rest of New Albion, and the Triad, and well, everywhere on this side of the planet, because the whole tidal locked thing. But that wasn't the point. The point was that the biofield had only barely begun to darken and block the blistering light outside, the closest thing the city ever got to night. It would most likely be dark by the time I got home. I don't think I would really be able to stay in a place where it was just sunny all the time. Like, be nice to actually have nighttime. Oh, darkish anyways. I started away from my apartment and toward the bistro. My mind wandered as I walked, glancing up at the sky. Though, I guess it's not really the sky. The biodome blocked the view of the real sky and filtered out the harmful UV rays. It looked like the sky, so I suppose it was the same thing anyway. I wondered if it looked the same in Delphine. I really wanted to go there someday to see. Not only that, there were ruins there, in some of the wastes closer to the Twilight region. But the Delphine government didn't let anyone near them. It was ridiculous that it was easier to go off-world to a planet 50 million kilometers away to see ruins than it was to research the ones on Arcalis. But that's what happens when 2 countries don't get on, I suppose. In any case, even if I could study the ruins in Delphine, I'd rather go to Dion, to finally see something other than simulated day and night, to feel real wind, to see a storm or the stars. Though it would only be an option if I made it into the prime tier and could continue my studies. So now I was back to thinking about the exam, which kind of defied the purpose of a relaxing evening. I pushed the thoughts away, determined not to think about it. I was about 2 blocks from home in a pedestrian walkway between 2 streets when I first noticed the crowd gathered up ahead. I paused, watching curiously as several more people wandered over. All of them were clustered around a large fountain there. A busker, maybe? I saw plenty of them on my way to and from class, though I rarely had time to stop and watch. This one must be pretty good to gather a crowd that big. Too bad it was kind of blocking the path I needed to take. I drew closer, and instead of hearing a performance of some kind, it actually sounded like someone talking loudly, though ranting might have been a better term. A demonstration or protest? I suppose it could have been some kind of dramatic performance instead of a musician. I was a little curious, and I needed to go through there anyway. Maybe I should take a minute to find out what was going on. But I wasn't really sure I wanted to bother with the crowd. So we have 3 options now. Join the crowd and see what's going on, squeeze past the crowd as quickly as possible, and take a different route altogether, just in case. Does anybody have any thoughts and opinions on which route we should go and take? I personally want to kind of see what's going on, so. Alright. We're going to join the crowd, see what's going on. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to see what was going on. Decided to see what was going on, whether it was a performance, demonstration, or something else. To avoid a few rowdy people at the fringes of the crowd, as I wove my way into the group to see who was speaking. The voice was louder now, and I could make out the words over the sound of the murmuring crowd. Strange man, you've all been lied to! All of you! You sheep that blindly follow the piper! Listen to me! We must stop the madness! What? I shuffled my way to the front to see a man in bedraggled clothes standing in the fountain. Water cascaded onto him, running in rivulets. What word is that? Rivulets. Running in rivulets down his hair and shirt, though he didn't seem to notice. Like everyone else, I gaped at him. He looks friendly. He looked like he hadn't had a bath in a while. His clothes were ragged, dirty, and his eyes were strange, mishmatched, with one that was pale and watery, while the other almost glinted red in the afternoon light. My gut twinged in anxiety and pity. Drugs? Maybe? That's quite the conclusion to jump to. It'd been an ongoing issue lately, and I knew red eyes were a telltale sign of one of the more prominent street drugs that had found its way to Cecilis. Poor man. You think you know the truth? You think you see it in the music that beckons you further to the dark? But this whole city is a lie. The lights, the sky above. The ones who know the real truth are among us, though. He was hissing and spitting as he shouted. I stepped backward, thinking I didn't want to be gawking at this poor guy. If anything, I should be reporting it, so I could get some help. There are kings and queens among us, ones who speak the truth in whispered hisses, like snakes that rise up from the ashes to scream reality. They're calling. They're calling! Do you hear them? Kings and queens? Like espers? He sounded like he was part of that weird esper-obsessed cult thing. The court, or whatever they called it. The man threw his hands out to the side and splashed forward towards the edge of the fountain. A collective gasp went up as everyone in the front row scrambled back. I was jostled to one side, trying to keep from being knocked to the ground. The man stepped up onto the basin's ledge, sending a spray of water over. His eyes went wide, and he suddenly swept his hands straight down. It was as if every drop of water squeezed off his clothes and fell to the ground in a single sheet. Another gasp went up the crowd as the puddle of water slowly spread towards us. Wait, he's an Esper? A flutter of anxiety spread through me. I didn't want to be here anymore. I wanted away. Now. This is not part of my plan for a relaxed evening. I looked for an avenue of escape as the man started shouting again, but I was hemmed in and no one would let me back through the crowd. You think you know what this world is about, but you're blinded by the chains over your eyes. I know. The truth, though. He dropped his voice to a hoarse whisper. I tried to push my way back through the crowd, already planning how I was going to contact the authorities when I was away. I know the voice that speaks the truth. A voice in the wastes, in the waters, in the sky, in the stars. I hear them inside my head. I finally gave up trying to shove my way to the back of the crowd. It's time to break out, to break away, to break everything. This city, that city, the false skies that imprison us. I would just have to dial in and contact the authorities from here, even though I felt bad about doing it. But this wasn't about being an Esper or not. It was about public safety and his personal safety. He needed help, clearly. I dialed quickly, but there was no response. Why is it taking so long to connect? I was so focused on the call that I didn't realize everything around me had gone really quiet. When I did look up, I froze, eyes wide. The man was directly in front of me, one foot still on the edge of the fountain and one on the ground, and he was looking right at me. A voice finally picked up on the other side, but my mind had gone completely blank, even as they asked for my name and nature of the problem. I know you. I know you. You're in my head now, too. The fountain man was muttering, those strange eyes boring into me. Everyone else was staring in my direction as well. I tried to back away, stomach twisting itself in knots, but there was nowhere to go. I'm sorry. You're mistaking me. You're mistaking me. You know me. You know me. I see the stars in your eyes. I am that merry wanderer of the night. You know me, right? What now? That took a weird turn. He held a hand out to me, beckoning me closer, but I shook my head frantically and pressed back against the crowd. He hopped onto the fountain's edge again, spinning in a wide circle with his arms splayed outward. I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where ox lips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses and eglantine. For one moment, I thought that maybe this really was a performance after all. A really, really strange performance. But the man's voice raised to a shriek, and he suddenly lunged at me. I screamed as well, instinctively curling into a ball, as if that would save the day. My body went numb, and at the same time, there was a loud crack. The stone edge of the fountain broke away. Water flowed freely from the shattered basin. The man staggered and went down again hard on the pavement. And it was like a shot had gone off and a herd of wild animals. There were screams. Everyone started to flee. Someone shoved me to the ground at the same time I heard sirens. I scrambled to my feet, soaked, scared, and confused. The man looked up at me, bleeding from his face, and I backed off, unsure if he'd jump at me again. A hand closed on my wrist and pulled me away. What? Come on! What are you? Before I could say anything else, I was dragged away. Wait! The sirens were nearly on top of us. Either my call had been tracked or someone else had called in. Either way, I didn't have much time to think about it. I was stumbling to keep up with the stranger who had helped me to my feet. When I glanced back one last time, the fountain man was standing as well. Our eyes met. For a long time, I thought he was going to come after me. Instead, he bolted away impossibly fast, as 2 cars of police officers drove up to the markers at the end of the pedestrian area. The stranger with a shock of blue hair pulled me into a little side alley where he let me go to catch my breath. I doubled over, hands resting on my knees. What the heck? Sorry about that. You looked like you needed a little help. Well, I don't know that I needed to be dragged across the street into an alley. I thought you might want a private spot to collect yourself. That seemed pretty scary back there. I glanced towards the opening of the alley. Well, it hadn't been not scary, but I hope he gets some help. Help? Well, I mean, you know, I think he was an Esper, and maybe on drugs. And that'd been a pretty nasty spill, though he hadn't seemed hurt when he'd run off. He tried to attack you. You don't know he was going to attack. Maybe he just wanted me to stand in the fountain with him. I'm sure you'd look fetching completely soaked, but I'm not sure that's what he had in mind. I'm just saying, he probably needs to be treated in a hospital, not hounded by SD officers. And I'm saying, you're the one who nearly got attacked, and you're worried about someone else? I lifted my chin, shooting him an annoyed look. It's not like he hurt me, and it's a bit much to assume he was going to. There's enough paranoia to go around when it comes to unregistered espers, especially now. But for all we know, he was just going to keep shouting without doing anything else. Everyone always assumes unregistered espers are up to something nefarious. He looked like he needed a bath and a hot meal. I don't think he was out to hurt people. He held up his hands, laughing. Okay, he was a harmless, drug-riddled, homeless esper. Got it. I didn't say he was harmless either. I just don't think it's fair to make assumptions about what he was going to do. Everyone has their own circumstances, you know? Well, that's true. And in any case, it seems like you were saved by the fountain falling apart. Huh. I shifted my eyes awkwardly to the side. Yeah, that... A shame, since I was about to come to your rescue myself. And here my heroics are, completely foiled by crumbling infrastructure. I gave him an exasperated look. But I was glad he was going to assume that was crumbling infrastructure. It's been a while since I did something like that. Does she have abilities too? Probably. Anyway, I'm Jack. Jack Visker. I snapped back to reality when the man introduced himself. I should probably apologize for dragging you away like that, but it seemed like the best thing to do at the time, especially with the public safety idiots descending on us. Are you sure you're alright? Oh, I'm okay. Like I said, he didn't hurt me or anything. I was just a bit startled. Excuse me. That's good at least. And I didn't get your name? Oh, sorry. It's Morgan. Like I said, a bit startled. Now that I was less distracted by everything else, I realized there was something about the way he spoke. A faint accent. It wasn't all that noticeable at first, but now that I was paying attention, I'd started to hear it. Delphine? That's what it sounded like to me. But he either hadn't lived there in a while, or he was trying to cover it up. I mean, it wasn't that strange. You just didn't meet people from there every day here in Cecilis. With the relations between the countries so bad at the moment, it was pretty difficult for anyone to get a passport into Cecilis these days. I wonder if I should ask about it. Everything okay there? Oh, sorry. got a bit lost in thought. So comment on his accent and ask where he's from, or keep the observation about his accent to yourself. I don't feel like I should ask about it, because that's none of my business. None of her business. Also, we don't know this dude. We don't know what his motivations are. Keep the observation about his accent to yourself. Alright. I decided to keep that observation to myself. There was absolutely nothing wrong with someone from Delphine being incessulous, but with all the tension these days, I knew there were some people that could be a little weird about it. Even if I actually wanted to travel there myself, even though I would have loved to have a conversation with him about Delphine, I didn't want to make him feel self-conscious or awkward either. The accent was faint anyway, so I could be mistaken. Anyway, I should be getting home. After that little display, I definitely lost all motivation to be in public. Is that where you were headed before you got roped into that crowd? Dinner, actually, but I think I might just get takeout. Not really feeling the whole social engagement thing at the moment. Want an escort home, then? I glanced back at the opening of the alley. I had no idea if they caught that man, but it wasn't like I was really worried he might come after me, and I didn't know Jack either. I mean, it's my apartment. I can get back alone. I didn't expect that you might get lost, Butterfly. Though I've known some people who are pretty bad with directions. I was more worried about your safety. Bro, you met her like 5-10 minutes ago. This is a little bit much in terms of like worrying about safety. It's Cecilus though, which is like any other city. Sometimes safe, sometimes not. I'm not going to force you. It was just an offer. Weren't you heading somewhere else too? Nowhere important. I chewed my lip uncertainly. I didn't want him to go out of his way, but company would be kind of nice. Bro, you just met him! She just met him. Okay, I'm that way. I indicated the general direction of my flat. Even better. That's the direction I was headed anyway. Are you sure you don't mind? Jack laughed and took my arm, steering me in the direction I pointed. You always worry this much about imposing on people? Don't get me wrong. It's cute, but it must be pretty exhausting. Not always. I'm just that I'm not in the habit of having strangers walk me home. I assume you're also not in the habit of being yelled at by fountain-dwelling, Shakespeare-reciting weirdos. Oh, you recognize that quote. Jack gave me an appreciative look. I'm more surprised you did. Ancient Earth literature isn't exactly most people's forte. Well, I've taken a lot of history courses, and I like learning about Earth. Earth, the third planet of a rather ordinary yellow star. I shook my finger in the air, mimicking one of my professors as I spoke. The planet that birthed our people and sheltered our kind for millions of years. The mother world of us all. Now millions of light years away, but forever grained into our genetic code and history. Jack laughed at my little performance. The tension from the previous incident began to drain away as we walked together. They really teach it that way? Some of them do, but I actually do find it pretty fascinating. I mean, it's a part of our history. It's nice to learn about it. What about you? Why do you recognize Shakespeare? Also studying history? Jack smirked and shook his head. Do I look like a student to you? I didn't want to assume. So I don't look like a student? I shrugged. He didn't, to be totally honest. He had the air of someone who had already been out of the world experiencing things, not locked away, desperately burying their head in a book so they could try and achieve the next tier or pass the next exam. I just know some dork who's always got a book glued to his face when he's not otherwise occupied. Somehow he managed to trick me into reading here and there. Sounds like a good friend. Though I worry a little if you actually have to be tricked into reading. It's a fairly basic skill, you know. Oh, I don't mind reading. I just have other skills I prefer to focus on. Bruh. Anyway, so your friend likes to read? Jack seemed highly amused that I ignored yet another obvious attempt to flirt. Yeah, he's a pretty good guy, though I think a lot of people might disagree. Interpersonal relationships aren't really built on the opinions of other people. If he's a good guy to you, that's all that matters. Learned that in one of your classes, too? I lifted my chin, giving him a look of mock offense. Learned it on my own, thank you very much. He just laughed again. It was kind of nice, having an interaction that had nothing to do with classes or studying, and that wasn't just a family member. It felt like it'd been a while. We walked quietly for a while, and soon my building was a little ways away, so I stopped and gave Jack a grateful smile. Thank you for walking me back. I appreciate it. No problem. I was coming this way anyway. Already said so. So... goodbye then. Looks like... well, maybe I'll see you around sometime. I hope so. Goodbyes were awkward usually, but Jack didn't drag things out. He grinned and turned around, walking back the way we'd came. Hey! I thought you said you were walking this way anyhow. I lied! He smirked before striding away without giving me the chance to respond. I watched him for a moment before I finally went back to my flat. So this guy is comfortable with lying and now knows where you live. And you just met him. Safety! What a strange evening. And now I still needed to figure out dinner. Wonderful. Paladin. Griffin. Paladin, where are you? Standing by. Target located. Can confirm telekinesis. Was Merlin right? Probably. What next? Contact Ivory Tower. Merlin will make the call. Alright, understood. Paladin, other factions are moving in. I think I saw a jackal. I'm guessing that's Jack. Might be a bit of a stretch, though. Are you sure? I'm not sure, damn it. Understood. We'll advise soon. I lay on my bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I kept replaying the evening's events. That man, his face, that look in his eyes as he looked at me. The way the fountain broke like that. I rolled over, trying to find a comfortable spot to no avail. I flipped my pillow over, pressing my face against the cool fabric, but it didn't help at all. Somehow, I felt strange. Feverish. It'd been a while since something like that had happened. It had never happened out in public before. Though I supposed I didn't have that frightening an experience in public either. Ugh. I just wanted to stop thinking about it. I finally flopped on my back, staring at the ceiling. Query. There was a little chime in my head, acknowledging the command. Cross-reference Shakespeare and Merry Wanderer of the Night. Information flitted through my head, and a soft ping alerted me that the search had found something. Transferred to display. I rolled over and picked up the display screen from my table as I propped myself up on my elbows. My eyes narrowed slightly as I was reading the writing there. A Midsummer's Night's Dream! That's what the name of that play was. It's been such a long time since we'd covered Shakespeare. Titania, a queen of fairies. Anxiety stirred in the pit of my stomach again. Fairy espers. I didn't know much about them except that the genetic markers and brain structure were a bit different from the norm. and queens were one of the top-ranked Esper levels. Pull up Earth mythology on the topic of fairies. I flicked the light on and sat up in bed, wondering if I should make myself some tea. If I couldn't sleep, I might as well stay up and read for a while. I tried my best to drown the anxieties of immersing myself in the ancient stories of a world millions of light years away and thousands of years old. I didn't know how long I read before I finally set the display aside and went to sleep. Chapter 2. I think, yes, we've been at this for about an hour now, so I think this is the point where I am going to leave it for today, and we will be going and probably picking up with Chapter 2, most likely next week. So thank you for everyone going and watching. I am about to stop recording, and I will be sticking around to chat with people afterwards.